what other things do you think made it possible to innovate in a way that others hadn't?
So innovation is like action sports or team sports. They require practice, and you have to start small. So when I came to quantum, I was very nervous that quantum had lost the ability to innovate.
I want to talk about this idea of genuine innovation and punching way above your weight and, going up against multi-billion-dollar competitors or whatever. And, you guys have, again, I know you're benchmarking right now, but potentially you have made the actual world's fastest.
I knew day one I got here, we need a new file system, right? We need a new innovative file system, but I knew there's no way we could do it unless we stair-step, and built up to the ability to do something this ambitious. But it took many years of practice.
Welcome to Innovation and Leadership. I'm Jess Larsen. Excited on this episode to have Jamie Lerner, CEO of Quantum. Jamie, thanks for doing this.
Sure, Jess, thanks for having me, and excited to get into it.
Let's talk about Quantum. So I was reading some stuff. I think you guys did 412 million last year. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, about right.
And for people who don't understand storage and why somebody needs to store unstructured data and what unstructured data is, can we dive into the world of video and all the things you guys do?
We specialize in helping people store end-to-end unstructured data. And probably we're talking about what unstructured data is. There's two types of data. There's structured data, which is, rows and columns of numbers and addresses and things that are very easy to analyze, very easy to manipulate. And then there's unstructured data, which is just can be thousands of hours of video or millions of photographs or X-rays or MRI images or geospatial data. And unstructured data tends to be really, really big, tends to be kept for decades or centuries. Think of it like all the movies that Disney has. They're going to keep those for hundreds of years. And it's the data that's least understood. If you have 1,000 hours of video, it's pretty hard to know what's going on inside there. Whereas if you have thousands and thousands of records or rows of structured data, you can use reporting tools and analyze that very easy. So for us, it's the least understood and probably the largest, fastest growing, and most interesting data in the world. And it's the data that everyone is trying to point AI at right now to make more sense of it.
Let's talk about this approach. I want to start with this. You come out of, Seagate. I think they're like 14 billion or 16 billion right now. You've been CEO before. You've had these, chief operating roles and big places. Do I understand when you came in 5 years ago, it was kind of in more of almost a turnaround type of role, or what was that like?
Yeah. Definitely Quantum was at a crossroads in terms of who Quantum wanted to be, how they wanted to run the business, what the strategy was going to be going forward, and really was ripe for transformation. And a big part of the work that we did here was creating a transformation agenda and an innovation agenda to take the company to a very different place.
Yeah. I'd love to know, we have a lot of founders and investment fund managers that listen to the show. I'd love to know what your mindset is, because Quantum's like a 40-year-old company now, right? So can you talk to us about what that was like walking into, hey, this is my task, this is what I'm going to, what your headspace was?
Yeah, oh, for sure. So, whenever you walk into a new role, whether it's a CEO role or just a salesperson role, it's always unnerving. And what I've developed is a method that I can walk into a new situation, often a distressed situation where things aren't going well. Often when you're hired, it's because you're being hired to do something that the person before you wasn't doing. So it isn't uncommon that, hey, we want you to turn something around. We want you to get a different result, a better result. And that creates a lot of pressure and anxiety. Like, Can I do it? And I use this method. It's not uncommon, but it's like called a 30-60-90, where I spend 30 days looking inside the business, not talking to people outside, not getting other opinions, just inside. And I'm looking at 3 things for 30 days. I want to understand the products, good, bad, and ugly. I often use a SWOT analysis. Just what are the strengths of our products? What are the weaknesses? Where do we win? Where do we lose? Just write down everything I can about the products. Then everything I can about our process. What processes do we have where we're very smooth and elegant, and what processes are rough and not so good? And then finally, our people. What are our people known for? Where are their key strengths? Where do we not have strengths? And then I do the same analysis, but from the outside in. I talk to partners, I talk to customers and say, what do you think our best products are? What do you think our people are great at? And then I look for breakages, right? Where do we think we're really strong, but everyone says, no, you're not that strong there. And in that analysis of our people, process, and products, just hypotheses start to come out. And that's where I move into the 90 days, where I said, after looking inside the company, looking from the outside in, there's just some things that have become obvious. And I stack rank those from the easiest to the hardest. And I go after the lowest hanging fruit first. Not because that solves the problem, but it brings my confidence up that I can pick a small thing and I can fix it. It builds other people's confidence that, hey, you know what? This person's getting some improvements, small improvements, but getting improvements. And we build up to bigger ones, and bigger ones. And I find that method just lowers anxiety. It almost always delivers the right result. It builds support around you because you're showing early successes. And I think I've used it over and over and over, and it works every time.
So can you tell us the story of that, of an actual example?
Yeah, I mean, quantum is a good one, right? I came into quantum and very quickly started learning. We had some products that are just amazing, different, and incredible. And we just had some very large holes. So, for example, while we had incredible technology for archiving data, we were missing certain technology for very high speed processing of data. So we could do the cheap and deep, keep your data for 100 years. But if you needed the world's fastest processing, we had some gaps there. So I was like, oh, that seems like an opportunity. And, we had some financial processes that were efficient. We had some financial processes where we were just too lenient. We allowed things that were inappropriate to occur. So we knew we had to change our financial processes to tighten that up. And we knew with our people, we'd been successful for 40 years. So I didn't want to do anything to disrupt our culture, but I knew we had to bring some new innovative ideas in. And so what we did is we started some simple things. Hey, we can make our products a little faster. And we did some small successes, then some greater successes. And what we ended up doing is we ended up resolving, we had some SEC investigations. We ended up getting that fully resolved. We had activists who were worried about our future. We ended up getting them resolved and getting our board more stabilized. We ended up getting the company relisted on the NASDAQ. We ended up paying down our debt, renegotiating our debt, and ultimately, in the high-speed category, we currently hold all 3 world records for video performance. So we went from being a laggard to now setting the world's benchmarks on video processing.
I forgot we weren't recording. Can you tell people about all the cool kind of companies and movies and stuff that you guys get to do that for?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of what we do, or a big part of unstructured data, is in the media and entertainment world. And we got started on unstructured data probably 20 years before anyone else, when no one even called it unstructured data. It was just media workflows, effectively helping, CNN and Fox News and the BBC process their newsrooms and do the post-production editing of newsroom data. We started working on movies, all the big blockbusters from Marvel movies to, all the big franchises, the, big studios. We help them with post-production technology, storage technology, and then archival technology. And that also led to sports. So we ended up, do a lot of work with the biggest sports teams in the world, whether they're NFL teams, MLB teams, MotoGP, Formula One. We work with all these different sports teams. And over the last 20 years in doing that, we've gotten so good at handling video and photography. We now handle video surveillance archives. We handle surgical video. We handle satellite imagery, military photography, fashion photography, but any large archive of unstructured data, we now handle really end-to-end, from when it's first collected to when it's edited, analyzed, and ultimately to when it's archived for decades or even centuries.
So I want to talk about this. I'm trying to find some quote that I wrote down. I can't find it in my own notes. But some presentation of yours I was watching, you talked about we service 5 of the top 5, I don't know, it was hyper users or something. What are they called?
Hyperscaler. Yeah, we handle
what's a hyperscaler?
Broadcasters, the world's biggest hyperscalers, something like 55% of the Fortune, Global 2000, and yeah.
What is a hyperscaler?
Oh, I mean, a huge cloud company, right? People who are, that it's the Amazons, the Microsofts, Alibaba, Baidu, Tencent, people who are running data centers that are so much more massive than the world's largest enterprises that they really have totally different requirements. That the technology that you would use for the biggest bank in the world or the biggest retailer in the world, that technology could not scale to meet the needs of an Amazon or an Azure, just because the scale of them is so enormous. And we started learning several years ago that we were invited to start working with some of these folks in a new tier of storage, a very large, very inexpensive tier. And in doing that, we really started innovating just totally different technology to support those customers. And in those innovations now, we're bringing those more and more to enterprises, where we're finding certain enterprises are now actually starting to be at the scale of certain hyperscalers as they've built their digital businesses to where their digital business is actually bigger than their traditional business.
Wow. Well, I want to talk about innovation. I want to talk about, especially in a way, you're like the new guy at the 35, 40-year-old company, and you're saying, let's innovate, but you've got to have the team that's been there the whole time, bring them along. Can you talk to us about Myriad? And, I was watching a presentation at NAB, and I think it's something like the world's fastest flash storage. Is that right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess you're asking, how does a company that is by no means as big as our competitors, we have smaller teams, we have smaller budgets, how do we out-innovate these enormous companies around us? And I got a couple of thoughts on that. One is, innovation doesn't happen organically. It's not a creative process. It is a very intentional process. And we run an innovation agenda where we look at critical customer pain points where there is not known technology to solve that. And we put very deep focus on, we are going to put energy towards that. That energy is going to require sacrifice, meaning to fund that, we're going to have to cut something else we're doing. We don't just have extra money to do it. So that we're going to make a sacrifice to do that. And also, we know that we are going to fail a lot. And we have a say-do culture, that when we say we're going to do something, we go do it. But doing it means we know that in the act of doing it, you are likely to fail possibly hundreds of times. And it's our understanding that it will take hundreds of failures to get something to work. So let's get about it fast. Let's fail fast. And the other thing that I've learned is I don't think great things come from huge teams. I've been at the biggest mega tech companies or teams of thousands, and almost every time a team of 10 to 20 experts who are deeply focused will outperform a team of 1,000 people who spend their days in meetings and coordinating and filling out spreadsheets and timesheets and God knows what. It just is drastically faster to have small teams of highly experienced people that are deeply focused on a goal. And, it's really been those pieces, a very focused innovation agenda, a say-do culture that understands that failure is acceptable, and small teams, highly experienced people. We bring that together, and Myriad is a great example of where Quantum's bringing to market what is likely the world's most modern file system, a converged file and object system. It's likely to set, we're in the process of benchmarking, but it's been designed to set all the world's fastest benchmarks for performance. It's been designed to be zero configuration. It just works. You don't need dials and buttons and training. You literally just turn it on, and it will, using AI and its own learning, it will configure itself. And it's designed 100% software, no cloud bindings, no hardware bindings. Stick it on any server from any country or any vendor, stick it on any cloud, and it just runs. So it's really incredibly innovative. I don't think our huge competitors have anything like it. And it is kind of surprising that a company with very modest resources was able to do it. So I think it's a proof point that innovation is not something that only sits in the hands of the world's biggest companies, and it's not something that only startups can do. You have a big advantage when you're a 45-year-old company in that you have 45 years of trust, 45 years of history, where when we come to market with a brand new product, unlike a startup, we have over 10,000 customers that say, I trust Quantum every day. I trust them with what they built for us in the past, and I trust their new innovations. And that does give us a big advantage.
Yeah, no kidding. I've got a theory. I'm going to run it past you. Feel free to disagree with me. Okay. I know, obviously you've got an action sports family. You grew up in San Diego surfing and other things. And I have a lot of founder CEOs and other CEOs on here who had an action sports background. And I think part of it, and I think it's an advantage for like entrepreneurship and innovation. I want to see if you agree with me. Because in my opinion, skateboarding is mostly not landing a trick. Like that's what skateboarding is. You go to your, you take your skateboard, you go somewhere. It's hours of not hitting your goal. And then like occasionally you hit it and you have this big celebration and then you immediately set a new goal, So to me, it feels like,
I agree with you.
Stand-up comedy, action sports,
right.
Some of these things are like, they prep you for like the frustration of innovation. Hey, we're going to set this big goal. We're going to try and punch above our weight and beat the big guys. And you don't get it, you don't get it, you don't get it, you don't get it. But you still, it's like Winston Churchill talks about of like not losing enthusiasm, defeat after defeat.
Right.
And do you see it differently or do you agree?
My thoughts. One is, I just think sports in general is a good way to grow up because you learn dignity in defeat. You learn that effort and practice gets a better result on game day. You get used to the butterflies in your stomach about critical moments. In sports, there are critical moments where you just have to perform. And in business, there's critical moments where you simply have to perform. And also you learn endurance, that in business, it takes endurance. In sports, sometimes you may not be the better team, but you endure longer and you end up prevailing because you're better conditioned towards the end of the game. But action sports has something that's different than team sports. In most action sports, one, you're doing something that is possibly highly dangerous. And you don't have a team around you. You're by yourself. And that's why I think you have a lot of CEOs with action sports background, because when you're racing a dirt bike, you do not have a team to support you. You don't have your buddies. You are by yourself doing something that could possibly injure you significantly. And when you're doing big air snowboarding, it is you by yourself, and you're trusting your own instincts, your own training, your own knowledge, and all of the weight is on your shoulders. You don't have a team to shoulder it with you. And the moment is so critical. Like when you do that one jump, like in a snowboard big air or in a skateboarding contest, it is sometimes no more than 30 to 50 seconds where hundreds or thousands of hours comes down to that critical moment that only you by yourself can achieve. And that's the way it feels as a CEO a lot of times, that it comes down to critical moments and you have a team, but really you're carrying a lot of that weight. And having grown up doing it, it makes it a little less anxiety when you do it professionally as a CEO. And I love action sports. I just think it's so awesome for kids. And I think that critical nature of it and that incredible self-confidence to do it is wonderful. I also think team sports are awesome. The ability to be able to communicate, work with a team, rally a team. So I love watching my kids do action sports. I love also watching them do team sports. And I do think they're very healthy, even if you're not successful. You don't have to be a great athlete. You don't have to be good at it. And that's kind of the other thing that's cool about action sports is things like surfing and snowboarding and skiing or skate. Those are things you'll do your whole life. So you may not be competitive later in life, but it's still a lot of fun to go surf or go wake surf or just go skateboard down a hill. Or go mountain biking. So I just think they're great ways for me also later in life as a CEO to kind of reduce my stress level by just going outside and doing some turns on the hill.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we should give a shout out to your boys for reaching such high levels competitively with their snowboarding.
Oh yeah, they're great little guys. Sebastian and Nico are their names, and they my son Sebastian is a big mountain competitor with IFSA, and Nico is a snowboard rider, border cross rider, and he races the FIS NORAMs. And so they're just great guys. They love it, and whatever they end up doing with it, whether they take it further or whether they just use it recreationally, I still think it's just incredibly great experience for them.
Yeah, it's so fun. Well, so let's go back to Myriad for a minute. For people with no background at all, if you're going to oversimplify what it is and why it's so special, let's go into that.
Myriad's an extremely high-speed storage platform. It's all flash with zero hardware bindings. So it can be run on any hardware you'd like. The entire platform is in web services. The entire platform sits in containers. So literally those containers can run on hardware. They can run on the cloud. You could add more containers and scale it so it can get massive. You can shrink it. So it's almost like its own cloud in its very own nature. It is its own cloud. And it scales like a cloud. It shrinks like a cloud. It requires no configuration, no setup. It's drastically easy to operate. And what it's good for, what it solves is, it's really ideal for AI and analytic workloads. So if you need to do very high-speed processing of data, whether that's rendering computer graphics for a feature film, or whether that's searching billions of files looking for a trend inside video surveillance data, whether that's searching x-rays for osteoporosis. It just is the premier platform for analyzing, operating on, and working with unstructured data.
So let's talk about this, because I have over 1,000 hours of footage just of this show across 900 episodes, right? And we keep talking about like how we should like hire ghostwriters to help me and use AI, go back through all the library and go like, okay, what's all the advice that the billionaires have given Jess? What's all the advice of the guys who, maybe they're not a billionaire, but they grew a company from 0 to 1 billion? And then, what's all the advice that the folks who grew to 100 million? And so like, can we compare those three? And what's interesting, like the more success you've got, what's different about what they're saying? And, or just, like going through 900 interviews, like it's just a lot. And so we've been building some custom AI in-house, just our own knowledge bases and stuff. But like two things. One, how should we be storing our data so that I don't lose those interviews somehow? And then two, talk to me about how Myriad can help us search something like that.
Yeah, I mean, our architecture is designed for exactly that kind of use case. So what it starts to do with your data is it begins to enrich it, learn about it automatically. So for example, when you load, for example, your content on the Myriad, it will begin to tell you, this is the fidelity of the video. This is the video quality. This is the face. It does facial recognition. These are the people in the video. Then it transcribes what they're saying into text. So you can search every word they're saying in text search. It can then begin to look for objects, like if someone's holding something or a logo's being shown. It can also look for trends in what they're saying. So it begins to mark your data with metadata tags. No one needs to type that in. It learns about it. And then that's using our AI algorithms, but you can begin to add your own algorithms on top of it, whether you wanted to use ChatGPT or something else to say, what are trends in these topics, or what are trends people are talking about, or themes? It can begin to pull those out. But what we do is we allow you to begin to segment your data. I only want to look at data from entrepreneurs. I only want to look at data from
investment fund managers,
these countries, these segments. I only want to hear people talking about the banking industry. And we build that. And our competitors would say, okay, I got 1,000 videos and I know the name of the video, right? Quantum.jpg or whatever, or Zoom.jpg. That's all they know. Whereas we know hundreds of things. We know, oh, it's a Zoom video. The CEO of Zoom is in that video. This is what he's talking about. These are the words that he's using. This is when in the video he talked about this subject and that subject. And so the data becomes enriched. And because it's enriched, you can do more with it. You can find things, whereas someone else says, I know I have thousands of video, and the state-of-the-art method I have for finding things is to watch it, And, we go well beyond that with our technologies.
Is there an opportunity for small guys to do this, or is this more just for enterprise-level clients?
Most of our technology is... our big storage platforms, probably more designed for the enterprise and mid-size. But we do have technologies. One of our products is called CatDV. It's for individual photographers all the way up to the world's biggest production houses to manage their content. So, for example, it would be where you would house all your videos, how you would search all your videos, how you would browse through them, how you would translate, like, for example, right now, our technology could take our conversation and in under 15 seconds, translate it to German, French, Spanish, any language you want, with subtitles, maybe 15 to 20 seconds, and you'd have it translated to 20 different languages. So that's just built into the platform. So that would be, and that starts at a few $1,000s. So that's used by, some of our versions of it start at $500. So it's It's used by small production houses. And again, it's used by the biggest sports teams in the world.
Wow. Let's go for the other direction. Let's talk about slow and cheap.
Yes.
Let's talk about tape for a minute. People don't understand the role it plays.
When I came to quantum, I was like, isn't tape dead? Like, how do we just get rid of this old platform? And I really wrote it off because I viewed tape was something you backed up data on. Well, why would you back up on tape? You can back up on hard drives or even on flash. You don't need tape. Seems like an old-fashioned way to back up data. And what I didn't appreciate was there's a whole new use case for tape that really was invented by the hyperscalers, which is, no, we're not going to back up data on tape. We're going to put real-time, near-line, live data, read and write data on tape like it was flash, like it's a hard drive. So you can just read and write to it. And it has special characteristics, meaning it's incredibly cheap and it is slow, but for data that you look at once every 5, 6, 7 years, would you be willing for it to take 1 or 2 minutes to get that data versus microseconds if it was 25 times cheaper? 1/25th the cost. Would you wait a minute? And if you're like, you know what? I'm going to dig up a photograph from 20 years ago. I'll wait a minute. It's 1/25th the cost. Those kind of radical economics, there are a lot of people saying, I've got about 5 to 10% of my data that I need microsecond access to. But about 90% of my data, I'm okay waiting a minute to 2 minutes to get it because I know I very rarely go to it. And we introduced that kind of nearline storage. And now it looks hyper modern. It doesn't look like tape. You don't even know that tape's there. It's just some big black box that you never even have to look at. But it allows you effectively, it is a ultra modern interface to tape that gives you just completely breakout economics. Yet you don't have to learn the old ways of tape. You don't even have to administer tape. It's just a big black box that sits in our data center or your data center. We manage it for you. You never even look at it, but you get this incredible economics. And right now, what we're seeing is an explosion in that tier. Because what people are saying is, now with ChatGPT, with this explosion of AI, that data that I used to throw out, I've got to keep every single byte of it. Because I'm going to be able to harvest learnings and things from my data that are going to allow me to compete. Because what people are realizing is ChatGPT is going to give everybody in the world the exact same result. Unless you have one thing, your special data. So if you go, all the data's on the internet, everyone's going to get the same analysis of that, except my private data from my company's 40 or 50 years legacy. If I can analyze that, I will have a set of AI outcomes and knowledge that no one else in the world has. So when an airline says, I have every piece of data about every ticket, every complaint, every praise we got, everything that ever happened in our airline, analyzing that is going to allow us to beat the competition. When a retailer says, I've kept every single video surveillance footage of everything that's ever happened in our stores, everything that's ever happened in our fast food chain, every time anyone ever slipped, anytime anyone ever frowned, anytime anyone ever laughed, I can correlate to where they were laughing, where they were unhappy, where they were exposed to possibly slipping. If I can analyze that, I'm going to beat my competition. And what's turning out is those who archive their data are going to have a massive advantage to those who threw it out. And we're having hundreds of companies coming to us saying, help me build a very low-cost architecture where I can keep every single byte of data that's ever created by my company because I know there's magic in it, whether I can analyze it today or not, because I know in the future I'm going to be able to analyze it.
Well, and I remember when you were talking about this on one of the videos of like, it's so much cheaper that you don't have to have air conditioning and cool it down because it's tape, and it has, some interesting security aspects where you can lock it down and
it does
it's not
have
so
this
hackable.
unintended consequence that, well, first of all, you go, how can tape be 1/25th the cost of anything else? You'd be like, well, it's a piece of cellophane with a chemical sprayed on it. No one's going to build a hard drive or NVMe or a chip. You're just never going to get as cheap as cellophane with a chemical sprayed on it. Now, the benefit of that is once you write the data to it, that piece of tape is on a little old cassette cartridge like the kind we used to have in our cars years ago. It doesn't need power. It doesn't need cooling. It can just sit there. I mean, it can't get incredibly hot or incredibly cold, but it basically doesn't need to be curated. It can last for decades. It can sit cold with no electricity going to it. Because its cellophane is very lightweight, so it doesn't need to be on a special floor. It doesn't need lots of power. It's incredibly green. And it has a very long life. A hard drive you probably need to throw out about every 5 years. A tape cartridge can last 30 or more years. So you would have to buy 5 or 6 hard drives to last as long as one piece of tape. And because it's cold, right, there's no electricity, it turns out that the number one way to stop cybercrime is to cut off electricity. If there is no electricity, no one can hack that item. If it's completely cut off, not from the internet, just cut off from power.
So if I wanted to put my 1,000 hours of these interviews on tape, how do I go about that?
You'd buy a low-cost tape archive device and just copy it on over. And it literally is that easy. And there are cloud providers who use tape tiers. There's us and other vendors that sell these tape arrays. So it'll look to you like a hyper-modern cloud storage. And you write to it like it's this super modern S3 interfaces, NFS and NAS interfaces. Yet on the back end, it's writing onto tape, and then you can take those cartridges, you can put them off-site, you can put them in a locker, you can put them in any number of places where they're extremely safe from being hacked, or you can keep them online where you're reading and writing to them. Now, they'll be slow, but they're inexpensive, and they'll be there for decades.
I want to talk about this idea of genuine innovation and punching way above your weight and going up against multi-billion-dollar competitors or whatever. And, you guys have, again, I know you're benchmarking right now, but potentially you have made the actual world's fastest. Let's go back to some of these principles around, small team of 10 to 20 experts and, heading into it knowing we're going to have hundreds of failures. What other things do you think made it possible to innovate in a way that others hadn't?
Well, it takes practice. And I would argue that some of the world's largest technology companies have lost their way in how to create and innovate. And really all they do is they maintain older products, and when they need a new product, they acquire it because they are unable to build it themselves. And I think those are companies that their longevity is probably at risk because they can't innovate on their own. So innovation is like action sports or team sports. They require practice, and you have to start small. So when I came to Quantum, I was very nervous that Quantum had lost the ability to innovate because we had not put out a product in almost a decade. And I would argue we had lost the ability to innovate. And so I resisted the urge to say, let's go build Myriad, because we couldn't have built it. We couldn't have done it. So what we did is say, can we take our old product and make it incrementally better? And we started there. Baby steps, stair steps is what I call them often. We had to learn to just write a feature. Let's write an innovative feature. Even
What's
if
an
it's
example?
Small. Our products were hard to use because the user interface was old-fashioned. Can we just make the user interface look a little more attractive? right? Can we take what was 4 steps and make it 3 steps, right? Can we just make it a little better? If our performance is taking 50 milliseconds, can we make it 40 milliseconds, right? Just a little better. And then, okay, those were 6-week projects. Now let's take on a 12-week project. Let's get a little more ambitious. We're not ready to build a new product. Can we create a version of the product that has a better interface, runs a little faster? Can we put it on more modern hardware? Can we take our product and move it to the cloud? So we started these small steps, bigger steps, eventually leading to, can we build an entire new platform ground up? It took us 5 years of practice to build up to being able to do that. So I knew day one I got here, we need a new file system, right? We need a new innovative file system, but I knew there's no way we could do it unless we stair-step, and built up to the ability to do something this ambitious. But it took many years of practice. And I would argue that a lot of the world's biggest tech companies are so focused on maintaining what's out there, they have no expertise in building something ground up fresh. And when they build something ground up, they culturally want to kill it because it threatens an existing product. You're like, you bet it does. Let the new product kill the old product. That's fine. And a lot of people are so scared to do that. And, I don't know if it's having an action sports background, but you might, in doing something, you might blow up something that's old and make something old look not cool anymore. Well, that's how it goes, but you can't be afraid of that, kind of blowing up your own stuff, like your own products. Your own products are going to get obsolete, so you might as well make them obsolete yourself. Why let your competition do it? You might as well kill your own products with new products better than someone else doing it.
So, without sharing the secrets, what's an example of something you guys did fundamentally different that made Myriad possible that others hadn't done? Or tell us about a breakthrough.
We did a whole bunch of interesting things. One is 5 years ago, we started building our technology as modules because I knew we were going to build to this, and we're too small, or just don't have enough resources to build everything ground up. So I started taking every product we had and said, build everything modular, build everything reusable, build everything as VMs or containers, something that is like a packaged module. So we could cheat later by taking these modules and assembling them and build something brand new faster than anyone else because we kind of already had a lot of the modules.
Lego.
So we started doing that, and so it's many innovations, our compression engines. We had a compression engine, an installing engine, a replication engine, all these little engines that were built very modern for older products, but I could harvest them later. So we kind of started laying down those tracks 5 years ago. The other thing we did is we took advantage of being late. Being late to market is awesome in high tech because you get to use technology the other guys didn't have. So our competitors built installers, built load balancing algorithms. Those are very hard to build. We didn't build those at all because we use Kubernetes. Kubernetes already has an installer. It already has a load balancer. It already has all these features and functions. So by us being super late to market, we had to do half as much work as our competitors because we leveraged cloud technologies, new innovations that they couldn't with their 12. Their products are only 12 years old, but in high tech, they're ancient. They're not using Kubernetes. They're bound to, our competitors are bound to custom hardware. They had to build their own installer, build their own load balancer. They have to maintain all that. We don't. We're using all the latest technology. So we were able to build the product faster, build it better, do less work, combine all our modules together and come up with something that when you look at it, just fundamentally is drastically more modern. And we call it, the late mover advantage.
By the way, what's Kubernetes?
Oh, it's think of it as it's a foundational technology for most cloud applications. It's containers. So they're basically an operating system and very often all the software and services you need to build an application. So, think of it as a piece of software that does a body of work, whether it's a piece of software that does some storing of data, does searching of data, does compression of data. And so you can take these think of it as little balls, little modules, and you go, this module compresses data. This module searches data. This little module, self-contained module, copies data from one place to another. And you just combine these little modules together and they make a larger scale application. And that's how effectively the cloud is built. Where you take, this module does credit card processing, this module is a catalog, and you assemble them into e-commerce. And we do the same modules and we assemble them into a storage architecture. And these little modules are all exactly the same. You treat them all the same. They scale like crazy. They fail over. So if one breaks, another one just comes to life. And they're really think of them as the same way atoms and molecules are to matter. These are the atoms and molecules that build cloud.
What do you think about my analogy that you building all these different things is like Lego you can put back together into your new thing?
Yeah, that's exactly what they are. They're bricks and you snap them together and one person makes a house, another person makes a spaceship. It's exactly the same thing. They're little building blocks that we all reuse and they make up the cloud.
So my follow-on question there is, when you're the CEO and you're the one who maybe has more vision than some other folks, and you need to push them further than they think they can go, or you need to help people with a lower risk tolerance than yourself, except we're going to have a whole bunch of failures, or just the general resistance to change and the general resistance of the unknown. Humans hate the unknown. Do you have any tips for leading teams through that?
I do. Not all companies have this, but I absolutely love having no choice but failure and death. There's many ways to fight a battle, but it's turned out that there's books written like the 33 ways to fight war, and the best, in my opinion, is when you look at your team and go, we are completely surrounded. We have no way to retreat. We have no option. There's no middle ground. We have no other choice but to do this or face near certain death. And it's amazing how galvanizing that is for a team. Because in huge companies, you're like, well, if we fail, we got lots of options. We can fail. There's other teams working on innovation. Our innovation could fail. Hey, our company's got lots of money in the bank. But it's amazing how powerful it is we must build this product. We must go to this new place because the things that we're doing are not going to get us there, and there aren't half measures. And to be in that kind of situation, it's amazing how quickly everyone realizes this must be done. There isn't a failback option. Failure is simply not there for us, and going back to the old ways is almost guaranteed failure. It's incredibly galvanizing as a CEO. You can either be in that situation or create the perception of being in that situation where it is literally life and death for the company. And when you've been in business 45 years, usually they've been through many near-death experiences. And it's amazing how a team comes together when it's like, okay, we're looking at a near-death experience. We have to completely bond together. We do not have time for idle talk. We don't have time for what are our other options. This is the option, and people get on with it with a lot of intensity. So you can't always create that situation, but I like that one. The other thing that I think is a savior in these extremely complex projects is details, just immersing in details. Because at a high level, people are like, I just don't see how we could do it. It doesn't all come together. But when you break it down into, let's get down into the very deep details of exactly the steps of how we're going to do it. And I think a lot of very large companies, a lot of the leadership can spend many years of their life in this high-level platitudes, high-level plans. And I like in a smaller company, and it still can be a company of size, even in a big company, it's harder, but leadership has to immerse itself in detail. And in the understanding of the detail, linking the details together, then the team sees, I see exactly my role, I see my steps, I see my detailed contributions, and how they're all going to come together into this innovation. And it's just total obsession around details and documenting them, living in them, breathing them, and showing that level of example from the top, where you're like, I want to see every bit of the architecture. I want to see every bit of how we're going to sell this. Don't give me the high-level PowerPoint. I want the spreadsheets and the line items, and I want to slog through it. And if slogging through it takes all day and all night, well, I've got all day and all night, because we have no other way. If this is going to determine whether we live or die, then I'm prepared to spend as many hours as it takes to go over every last detail to make everyone has to line up. And that is kind of what it takes to do this kind of work. And it's not for everyone.
We've been talking about action sports so much. I want to make an analogy and ask if you experience this. Like, I think about trying a really hard trick.
Right.
And you try and try and try. And then you start to get to this point of like, maybe I'm never going to land this. Like,
Right.
You've just done it so many times, and you're like, it's like skateboarding when you're trying to jump too many stairs. You're like, like the furthest you've ever jumped is a 4-stair, and now you're trying a 10-stair. And what happens is you jump off it like 50 times, and you don't even attempt to land on your skateboard because you're too scared every time. And like, you're like, this might not be a makeable trick. This might not,
Yeah.
There's all sorts of situations like this for action sports. But then there's those ones where you're like, okay, this should be makeable. There's no logical reason that I can't get the level of coordination to land this trick. It's just no matter how many times I do it, I'm not landing it. And there's such a temptation to quit. There's such a temptation to learn another trick. My guess, and tell me if this isn't true, my guess is even when you've got that level of motivation for the innovation of like this or death, there gets to these times where you're like, I don't know if this is possible. Like,
Right.
are we like, were we too ambitious? Like, is this in the realm of the possible? Because we had so many failures. Did it get there or not really?
Yeah, look, I think about it in two ways. One is there are scenarios where you are trying to build a bridge too far. And you have pressures of, I've got to get a product to market, I've got to get revenue, I've got to do something. And there are times where you make a decision, I am going to make certain product sacrifices for the realities of a market, or certain times where you're like, this project, we got to call it. It just, what we're able to build is not that compelling. The innovation is not that great. It's taken too long. It's too hard. We just couldn't get there. There are those situations, and it takes the guts to say, we as a team are just not going to get there. And can we harvest learnings from this? Can we take pieces of it? What can we make of this? Or do we just say, you know what? We can sit here and try this in your analogy. We can try this trick 1,000 more times. We're not going to get a different result. So let's move on to another trick or some other thing. But this, you got to know when to call it. But I will tell you this, for those who link complex tricks together, they almost always use the same technique. When I watch the world's elite athletes link together a trick that seems impossible, they never approach the trick in its entirety. They break it into pieces. And it is a linking, and that's why I use the word linking. Almost every major trick is the linking together of many pieces, and they get each piece individually, and then they link, but they break it down into smaller pieces, and they master each piece, and then to begin to link more together. And so it's similar in business. When you're doing a very complex project, you have to get down into the details, break it down into achievable pieces, because the entirety of the project is overwhelming. But by breaking it into achievable pieces that you can link together is usually the only way you get there. And if you don't make it all the way, you have enough pieces that it's still a cool trick. Maybe you didn't do it all, but you have enough pieces you've linked together where you still walk away with something valued. But I do think that people who kind of just say, we're going to take this whole thing on as one enormous undertaking, I think they overwhelm themselves, they overwhelm the team, they don't know what their milestones are, and I think it tends to go nowhere. So my
that's
thought.
so helpful. That's so helpful because I keep thinking about, our discussion before the show, talking about our investment fund building these action sports, these tiny house cabins for action sports families, right? With all the different elements to it, right? And I think about my analogy I used earlier about hey, the most you've ever jumped on your skateboard is a 4-stair, and now you're trying a 10-stair, and it's you try 1,000 times, you're not going to land it, right? And it's has a lot to do with the fear of when you start jumping off something that's as tall as you, and you have to cover a distance that's further than you are tall, and you just don't have the, for lack of a better word, muscle memory for it, right? But as you're talking, I'm thinking, yeah, you know what the trick is? You go back and do your 4-stair 20 times, and then you do a 5-stair 50 times. And then you do a 6-stair 50 times. And you do a 7-stair 50 times. Then you do an 8-stair 50 times. And it is
the thing that leads to injury, the thing that leads to people quitting the sports, and the misperception spectators have of the kind of sports you're talking about is, oh my God, that guy's just a maniac. It's he is not a maniac. She is not a maniac. That is a very structured methodology that when they did that trick, they were not worried. They were not worried about getting injured. They were not worried because they had done all the detailed steps and thousands of hours of putting together that when they did that trick, they knew they were not going to get injured. They weren't doing it's the person who goes, oh, I'm just going to go for it. That person scares me. Right? When you see these things that look like crazy tricks, to that person doing it, that is a very calculated, planned, and structured undertaking, very similar to taking on a large software project or a large construction project. That athlete had built that building brick by brick, methodically, and they weren't just going for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so encouraging as I'm sitting here thinking about development, and we want to use alternative building materials, and we want, before we talk, I was telling you about all the things I want to do different. We're hoping that every single of our properties is one of one in the world. And we actually just ordered, my brother, he ordered $10,000 of parts from China and is building a custom 20-foot CNC machine so that we can cut things out that nobody else can buy, because there are CAD files and we cut it out. There's nowhere, it'll be so cost intensive for them to copy us because they have to start from scratch, right? It's as you're talking, I'm just thinking, okay, what I need to do is I need to build a runway in cash flow burn rate runway where we can afford to be patient and go through every single thing over and over until we've mastered this one over and over till we master this, working with the, working with the counties and the permits people to say like, hey, we want to do this thing you haven't done before. Can we get this approved? And we need to be able to last going back to city council until we can get that type of campground approved. And I just like, it sounds so dumb that this is a surprise to me, but like, it's just so helpful to think of like, nope, slow down, take individual pieces, have the patients keep doing them until they perfect them, then put the Lego together.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to end up with a enormous spreadsheet of, to build this house, I need to get the door right. I need to get the window right. I need to get the flooring right. I need to get the roofing right. And like, you're just going to, it's overwhelming. Be like, all we're going to do is work the door. Like, till we got the door nailed. Okay, now we're going to move on. And you just break it down to pieces. Be like, we can't look at this whole house because we're just like, we'll freak out. But we're going to put all these tiny pieces that we're going to link together. And you might have to, in the beginning, take some shortcuts to say, hey, look, in order to meet our budget, in order to meet our time frame, we're going to make certain sacrifices. And you do have to look at all those details to say, which of these have to be perfect and done right? Which of these, you know, we could actually get by with using a commercial off-the-shelf product or something that maybe not as sustainable as you'd like it to be. But, you know, and you understand, really, it's a big gut check of like, it to be true to ourselves, what are the things that we can maybe throw overboard? And what are the things are just we absolutely are unwilling to sacrifice? And I get motivated by our chief development officer where he goes, our product just has to work. And he will make no sacrifices on allowing there to be a button or a dial or like, he will not allow it. He goes, if we allow the customer to have to turn any dial, then there has to be a manual, there has to be training, the whole thing breaks. Like, he will not, simply will not allow it. Now, can we throw a feature overboard? Sure. Can we OEM something that we couldn't build ourselves? Sure. But we will not make a ease of use sacrifice. And we know these things we can sacrifice, these we never will. And these will literally die fighting before we cave in on these. These will give up on more easily. And you have to look at the structure you're building and say, what has to be custom built by our CNC table? And what are things that we can go to Home Depot and get? And
I think about your friend that we were talking about before the show who started Baldface Lodge in interior British Columbia. I mean, it's like one of the most famous destinations in professional snowboarding these days, right? It's almost like a status thing if you've been to Baldface or not, okay? And Travis Rice holding natural selection and stuff, right? But, you know, your point that like he started with a yurt. He didn't start with the amazing cabins and everything that's up there. He started with a yurt, you know, and like I may have to accept of like at our properties, at our first property, we're starting with a yurt and we're working our way into the complexity and the one of a kind and the things nobody on earth has ever seen before. And
you should probably have Jeff Pincero on. I mean, he's a pretty fascinating guy who kind of goes off into the wilderness in the middle of nowhere and goes, hey, I'm going to build like an amazing lodge here. We're going to have the most elite snowboarding events in the world here. I mean, that's a hell of a vision. And, you know, I think he started with something under roughly $150,000.
I totally want to have him on.
And built the whole, I mean, talk about having a vision that you have absolutely no way to execute on. And just like guts and, you know, I'm going to see it through and literally I'm going to build one season at a time. I'm going to build one building at a time, you know, improve the food every year. And he's got a hell of a story to tell and it's a really cool outcome. And now he's off. I think they're developing new ski areas entirely based on kind of his method. And
yeah,
he's a fascinating guy.
I got to get you to put in a good word for me. I'd love to have him on the show. And like, as we're just talking, I'm just thinking like, you know, I'm going to have to do this one property at a time and on our, you know, just do these 20 cabins and just work our way through them and they get better and better. And like, if we're going to do this at scale and become as big as the, you know, the giant real estate investment trusts that exist today, I'm going to have to be willing to go, as you said, stair by stair by stair by stair to get to that level. And like, it's one thing to CNC a cabin. It's a different one to CNC cabins all over the world at these different surf spots and snowboarding spots in Alaska and northern Japan and stuff, right?
I mean, I think when I think of mistakes that I've made, I had that big, ambitious vision that blurred the vision of that's an awesome vision, but it starts by building one that's awesome. And you end up, I'm so interested in the big vision that I take my eyes off the details of the very low-level, painful details. And by doing that, I never achieved the big vision because the short-term thing I built, I didn't obsess over the details because I was thinking about the bigger vision. And I find a lot of people who are really successful in business, they often never thought of the bigger vision. They just obsessed over that one item, and that one item was so good, it became pretty obvious, well, I should make 2 of these items, and then 4. But the first item was so good, it started the flywheel. And I think what can be dangerous is you have such a big vision, but you never get the flywheel turning because you didn't spend enough time obsessing over the very first cabin or the very first customer, and you just got to obsess over that. And I think at big companies, again, they think that's why I don't think much innovation happens there is they're so like everything has to be millions of them and hundreds of thousands of customers that they never get just build something for one customer that works and it's great and then go to 2 and then go to 4. Like they can't go back to that step. They're so far gone from that. It's hard to ever back up to that state. Like they've lost that muscle memory. Like it's gone.
I feel like this episode is extolling the virtues of like patience, endurance, determination, like the guts to start small, the guts to not do it all at once, like patience to actually do what it's going to take.
I know there's those entrepreneurs who created something and the first attempt, it was amazing and it exploded and they were massive success. And I hate looking at companies like that because that is not the experience that 99.9 of us have. So a lot of times we obsess in business about those, whether it's Microsoft or Google, these incredible success stories. The issue is people think about those and obsess about those a lot. And what they have to understand is that's like lightning striking. That is like, it is a very rare set of events. The majority of us, it doesn't happen that way. It's slow and it's methodical and it's detail-oriented and there's lots of failure and disappointment. And looking at the Googles of the world and the Facebooks, that's an amazing experience for them and I'm jealous as hell about that experience. Unfortunately, you cannot use that as your template because those circumstances happen so very rarely.
Well, and think like statistically, you're most likely to become a billionaire in your 60s. But if you looked at the business press, you would think it was your 20s, like before 30, right? Because what does the business press love to cover? The guy who became a billionaire before 30.
Exciting. And, in retrospect, it's all about my plan, my thought, how I designed all this. And the reality is it's more to do with just a set of incredible circumstances came together and in an absolutely wonderful way. And you managed it really well, but a lot of it is circumstance and timing, and it's not all methodical thought.
Where the folks who hit billion in their 60s or 70s, it was much more this stare upon stare upon stare, plus vision, plus some luck, plus
grinding, not giving up, methodical attention to detail, going over and over again and failing and starting over. And that is more often the case than, hey, I just, my first product just took off like a rocket and the rest is history. So, I think it's important to study businesses that exploded on day one as well as ones that took many, many years. That's why I love Colonel Sanders. I freaking love Colonel Sanders. The guy failed and failed and failed and failed. It wasn't until his I think 60s or mid 60s that
I think he didn't have the. I think the second location of Kentucky Fried Chicken, which funny enough was in Salt Lake City, Utah. I think the second location Didn't happen until he was 65. And like people today don't realize like he was like the Jeff Bezos, the Mark Zuckerberg of his time. Like when KFC like took off nationally, he was like the biggest name in the business press, right? 65 before he got his second little location, and then it goes on to thousands, right?
Right. I don't know. I get more inspiration out of that guy. And when you read a story of just compounded failures and attempts and failures and all these things he tried for so many years, I just think that's more inspirational to me than the person who first, in college tried something and it just took off like a rocket. Like that's awesome, but that is not most business people's experience. And there's not a lot from that experience that you can take and apply to your life because that just is such an anomaly. I think the things that we're talking about are the more likely experience for most business leaders. Is it's more of a grind, it's more methodical, it's detail oriented, it's step-by-step build up and probably more disappointment than success. But when you do have those successes, they do feel pretty good.
No kidding. Well, listen, if people want to find out more about Quantum, where should they be going on the internet?
Yeah, we're quantum.com. We're pretty easy to find. And, again, if you're dealing with large quantities of unstructured data, we're the people who've spent 45 years of our existence learning about it and perfecting it. And that's what we do. But I hope the things we discussed help all business leaders. I know I get a lot out of programs like yours, and I like to listen to other people's experiences. I get a lot from it, so I hope this helps.
That's great. Well, what do you want to leave people with today? What's like piece of advice you'd go back and give a younger version of yourself? One of the best pieces of advice you ever received? What's something to leave people with?
When I think of my biggest regrets in business, it's when I should have hung on longer. I should have fought longer. I should have stuck with it longer. I should have toughed it out longer. I do think it's very hard. All business is hard. Everyone's going to deal with difficulties. And when I think of my biggest regret, it was difficulties that I threw in the towel too soon. That I just didn't have the wherewithal, the strength, the support system to just go a little longer. And so for everyone who's going through a difficult period, and all of us in business, no matter how successful, have difficult periods, I would find the things around you in your life, the support systems, to just see if you can go longer. It's amazing how many successes came from just lasting a little longer, going a little longer, seeing it through a little longer, not giving up, and just when your competition is giving up, you have the wherewithal to go longer and see it through. Because a lot of business success is not about lightning striking day one. It's about the longevity to see it through.
Solid gold. I love it. Okay, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.